The focus on South Africa is everything South African, concentrating on current events, interviewing politicians coming over, or anything South African related.
We are here with Mbali Ntuli, excuse me, it must be my British accent. Yep, the new DA leader, youth leader. Let me correct that. Hey, could still happen. So, welcome, and first question would be, what brings you to London?
I've come to London for a little bit of fun, and thank you for having me.
More on to the serious stuff. Obviously, first thing is congratulations on your election as a DA youth leader.
Thank you.
I mean, at what stage of your life did you decide to follow politics?
I've always really been interested in politics since I was young, but I think my first real foray into serious politics was when I was 18. I was in my first year of university, and I realized that a lot of students were battling in terms of their financial aid, despite the fact that they had good marks. So I went out and found all the political parties and asked them what they were doing, and the DA was the only party that really had concrete answers for me, and so I decided to become a bit more active about seeing what the political parties in our country actually were saying for young people. And that's, pretty much how I started getting into it. And then I started building branches, and I contested, and the rest is history.
So what answers did the DA give you which appealed to you? I mean, if you could just give us a couple examples.
Well, on that specific issue which I was inquiring about, it was about students' funds and the way that they were allocated to, obviously, students. And the Democratic Alliance had a whole plan on how they wanted to reform the way that student funds were given. So they wanted to give it to poorer families, they wanted to give it to families with kids that had good marks as well, so that they would get sliding bursaries as opposed to just having financial aid and then leaving with a whole bunch of student debt at the end. And they also wanted the funds to go to things like not just tuition but also residence and food, which wasn't previously the case. So you'd have these kids coming to varsity, but they'd be hungry and they wouldn't have somewhere necessarily to sleep, but they'd have tuition money. So it wasn't really conducive for them to having a whole holistic view on university. And I like the fact that the DA was pushing that.
So if the DA were to attain presidency today, how many years do you think it would take to turn around corruption, education, unemployment and service delivery?
Well, we took over the Western Cape in 2009, and I would say that since then we've done a very good job of eradicating corruption. We've weeded out all corrupt officials, either in pension packages or, fired them. Education, we've also managed to turn around. We have the lowest unemployment rate and we have the highest matric pass rate, as well as standardized schooling and regular, accountability tests for principals and teachers, which you don't have anywhere else in the country. So the country is a massive thing. That was just one province. I would say at least a good, I'm guessing here, like 7 years. And that is with all the best dedication and best political will in the world to make sure that things are happening. The big problem I think that comes when you take over as a government is the public service, because they've been so used to a different government and have allies and different people. That's always the biggest obstacle. It's not necessarily about actually getting things done, it's about making sure that officials get on the same page with you and don't feel threatened or don't feel loyal to the previous government and want to overturn things. So I think it would take some time to win over the public service nationally. I'd give it a rough estimate of about 8 years.
I mean, in your personal capacity as a DA youth leader, we know very well that the South African unemployment rate is very high amongst the youth. I mean, do you have anything in plan where, you're looking at ways of actually bringing that down or just empowering the youth, because it seems South Africa needs that a lot, and Africa as a whole?
Sure, as a Democratic Alliance Youth, we've had a lot of proposals that we put on the table of how we can start curbing the unemployment crisis. The first has been the youth wage subsidy. We believe that that's a good way to jumpstart the process of getting young people employed. If it had been employed in 2010 when it was originally tabled, it would have now already employed about 500,000 people. We then want to, really push for entrepreneurship, and we do this in the Western Cape with works and skills programs, and we've been able to have an 80% retention rate with over 700 companies that work with government. So it's a public and private sector-led way of creating jobs. And then, of course, we have things like collateral funds, where government will stand surety for young entrepreneurs, because you need to incentivize young people to take risks, because obviously they don't have much capital, and so they can't really get credit. But you want to be making sure that you're creating people that are going to be job creators as opposed to job seekers all the time, which is what our current government does. And so those are the kinds of things that the Democratic Alliance Youth would like to do. We like to try and say this is the opportunities that young people should have, and they should grab those opportunities and do the best. So things like entrepreneurship, work and skills programs, funds that help especially young people in our country who are semi-skilled or not skilled at all, because that's a very big problem. We look at programs, and we have implemented programs in the Western Cape where we govern that deal specifically with those target groups. And that's just how you start the ball rolling. If we had accountability in our government departments like the NYDA, then we'd have far stronger youth unemployment crisis aversion systems, and we push for those as well as an Democratic Alliance Youth in our role as opposition and an oversight role.
I mean, although you are the opposition, you've mentioned some good points there on actually reducing youth employment. I think, why do you think the government is not listening? Because if these are good ideas, why are they not even taking one of these ideas?
I mean, the youth wage subsidy actually came from the ANC government. So that was actually one of their policies that they then abandoned because they felt under pressure from COSATU. The problem in our country is that our alliance partners hold each other to ransom. So one can't do something without the other saying yes or no. And if there is no unison in terms of all three of them agreeing, then there's going to be a problem and you end up having a deadlock, which is what we've had, I would say, for the last 5 years on some of the major economic decisions, policy decisions that should have been taken in our country. And the youth wage subsidy is the most recent form of it. So it's something that the ANC agrees to, that FEDUSA, which is the second biggest union in our country, agrees to, but COSATU doesn't agree to, and so it has been stored at NEDLAC and has, become something that is agreed to in principle but doesn't actually really work. So until our government can have the strength of their convictions to be able to tell their alliance partners that they are going to implement things that work for young people, we're going to continue to be in a deadlocked system in our country.
I mean, that's the question I've been personally dying to ask you, which would be, you are a young black woman in South Africa. You come obviously from a black home. I mean, fine. There's this misconception that if you're black, you straight away ANC. I mean, in your household, do people question why you went DA? Are they against that? Will they try and convince you to say, hey, ANC is better?
I grew up in a household with parents who were very liberal in how they politicized their children. They let us explore all political parties. It was spoken about around the table. It was debated quite heavily. So there's never been any sort of taboo about what political parties one has been associated with. Both my parents have voted for about 4 different political parties, so they don't have loyalty in terms of that themselves. So for me to choose to be in the Democratic Alliance because I self-identify as a liberal and amongst a number of other things that I like about the party wasn't a huge crisis within my immediate family. My extended family had some questions, but I think that I've been able to, swayed their misgivings or fears mostly. It has been for me.
And what about the community? I mean, friends, people around, don't they question that? Don't they make bad comments to speak of, or just negative comments about the choice you've made?
My community not, but I think that the South African community in general is still very, very cautious about black people who join parties that have not historically been associated with the liberation movement. So if you're not in the IFP or the ANC or the PAC and you're a black person, there's a lot of caution thrown at you towards your affiliation. And then of course it branches out into a whole bunch of other things like what your family history must be like, what you must be like as a person, which are complete assertions on your character. So there is that part of the negativity of politics to deal with, the stereotypes that come with being in the party that isn't there. And it's not always easy. But I mean, that's part of what I must do as a politician, is to keep telling people why I'm in it, and people must make up their own decisions and choices about why they join parties.
I mean, moving on to the elections next year, there's loads of other political parties forming recently. Do you feel that they're a threat in any way, not just to the DA but to the ANC itself?
I haven't seen a new party, and the new parties that have sort of come up now are Gang. Malema has just launched what he says is the Economic Freedom Party. a new party, which is the MK Veterans Party. I haven't seen any of those new parties really put out a policy position that anybody can really have anything to say about or tackle. It's mostly been rhetoric, and I think the South Africans are very tired of rhetoric. And I think that going towards 2014, it's becoming clearer and clearer that it's only now a two-horse race between the DA and the ANC. Obviously in the spirit of democracy, I wish all parties the best of luck, but I don't think that any of them are going to make much of a dent in either of the two big parties in South Africa. Instead, I think they'll fragment the rest of the opposition amongst themselves, which is piecemeal, really.
What message would you send to most black people, including my grandparents, who seem to not divert from ANC to say we see DA as a white party and we see the black members there, including yourself, as being just puppets of the white man to speak of? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I would say that they shouldn't sell themselves as black people so short to think that other black people can't possibly be in the positions that they are without having worked hard and have to have been put there. I've been in the Democratic Alliance for 7 years. I've worked really hard to get here, and I think it's an insult to themselves to think that that's what black people aspire to be used as. But I would also say that I do understand what white people in the past have been associated with, but to say that those are certain white people, and those people are not people that are in the Democratic Alliance, or certainly not people that are in the leadership of the Democratic Alliance. You can't account for who your supporters are sometimes. And I'd also say, they need to start voting with what they believe is going to be best for their futures and their grandchildren's futures. And if they look at the ANC now and the leaders that are coming up there and the leaders that are currently there, who are being incredibly corrupt and are looting, state coffers and are not looking out for the poor, then they need to start thinking, does it matter if it's a black person who's taking care of me, or do I want the best person, whatever color that they might be? And I think that that's what they were honestly fighting for in the struggle, and I think that they need to remember that and not, buy into the ANC's rhetoric of black people for black people only, because even in the struggle, there were white people within the ANC that helped the struggle, and I think that our grandparents have been put in a situation where they've been made to feel incredibly loyal and nostalgic to what the ANC is, forgetting what they're doing now, which is not looking after the black man.
How do you change that mindset? Because surely it's a mindset, and the majority of South Africans seem to not understand that, and moving forward, fine, we call the DA the official opposition, but when the majority of South Africans is still just one-minded, how do you change that mindset to say, people have fears like, if the DA win, they'll take us back to apartheid, we'll have white leaders again, and us black people will be forgotten. How do you change that mindset?
You change it by everywhere you are as a party. You make sure that you're delivering for people. You make sure that people see you doing the work that you do, and you make sure that people can meet you and connect with you. Because I think the big problem with the DA and the South African public is that there's almost a detachment of any real connection or understanding. Because in the past, my party has been run quite almost like a business, whereas the ANC is very emotion and emotive driven, and they're on the ground and talks to you, and you feel that these are people that understand you. The DA is exactly the same, but we possibly haven't been as good as getting that message out there. So what we need to do to convince people that we are for them and with them is to be for them and with them, and that's by proving to be good at the jobs that we do, delivering on the service that we can, and making sure that when the community needs us, we are able to be there and help them. I think that that's how you win people's trust over. I don't think people want to hear big fancy ideas or big words about what you say you're going to do. People want to see you doing it. And I think that the DA is doing that very well now. I think that our record of being uncorrupt and being good on delivery is probably one of the best in the country. Now what we just need to make sure is that we're doing it in every single household in South Africa.
All right, something a bit lighthearted. Besides politics, what do we know about Mbali? Besides politics, what does she do outside of politics? You mentioned, you like to party. You're doing a party tour of Europe. So fill us in more.
Yeah, Mbali's 25. She likes to have a good time. She likes to read. She has weird hobbies that she likes to do, like play the harmonica and chess. She's an ordinary person.
Mbali, thank you for your time, and enjoy Europe, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, and invite me again.
Will do. Thank you.